So what exactly are you going to learn in this course? Well, in this course you will learn how to create a complete chatbot web application using Python. Specifically, I'm going to be using the Chatbot module in order to create that awesome chatbot using Python programming language. And probably the most powerful programming language because it's capable of doing pretty much anything. It's super powerful and it can do pretty much anything you can think of. And I'll also be using Flask in this course to create that web application. So Flask is a web development framework and it's based on Python. So it uses Python programming language to help you create a web application, and it's going to save you a lot of time because it will help you create a complete web application quickly without the need of creating a long code, because it takes care of a lot of things. So by the end of this course, you should have a complete chatbot web application that is capable of interacting with the user and responding to user messages. And I'll also teach you some techniques that will help you create a chatbot web application that is specialized in doing something. So you will not just create a general web application. Instead, you will be able to create a web application that is specialized in doing something. For example, I'll teach you how to create a weather chatbot web application, which is going to get the weather forecast to the user and provide it to the user. So this course is very important because chatbots are awesome and will help you if you incorporate them in your website or in your business to help your customers. So in order to download Python for Windows, you need to head on over to python.org, and then if you scroll, you'll find under download the latest version, and click on it. And then if you scroll, you'll find many files. You need to download the file that is suitable for your operating system. If you are using Windows 32, then you need to install Windows 86 executable installer, and if your Windows is 64, you need to install Windows 64 executable installer, and it's gonna take some time. And once it's done, I'm gonna open it, and then I'm gonna click on run, and then I'm gonna here check the add Python 3.7 to path. This is very important. You need to check this. You need to check add Python to path. And then click on customize installation, click on it, and then make sure that you check all of these. We need pip, we need the documentation, we need the ID, and then make sure that the environment variables is checked. And then I'm gonna change the location where I'm gonna be installing Python to just Python inside my C. So I'm going to head on over to my PC, and then I'm going to open the C, and then I'm going to create a new folder in the C called Python. New, and then folder, and then I'm going to name it Python with capital P. And then once it's created inside the C, we need to just make sure that it's inside the C Python, and then / Python 3.7, and then click on install. And it's gonna start installing after you click on yes. It's gonna take some time. Be patient. And then once it's done, just click on close. It's gonna say setup was successful. And then if you click on Windows sign on the lower left side, and then click on all apps, you will find that a new app, which is just Python, you'll find that Python has been installed here. It says Python 3.7 module, and also the IDLE, and also the Python manuals. And also if you click on command prompt, this is very important. You need to open your command prompt and then type Python. This is very important. Type Python, and then if you hit enter, it's gonna print out this message. If this message is printed out, it means that Python has been successfully installed. Otherwise, then it means there is a problem. But Python is very easy to install. You will probably get this message, which means that Python has been successfully installed on your Windows. In order to download and install Python, you need to head on over to python.org and then hover over downloads and then click on your operating system. If you are using Windows, you need to download the one here for Windows, or if you are using Mac, you need to download the one for Mac. But for Mac users, before you download Python, you need to check if Python is already installed on your Mac or not. To do that, you can head on over to your terminal, open your terminal, and then in the terminal, just type Python 3 and then -- version, and then hit enter, and it's going to tell you if Python is installed or not. If Python is installed, it's going to print out the version. So as you can see here, the version is 3.7.1, and I'm going to be using Python 3. If you type Python, only Python without 3 and then -- version, it's going to print out the version of Python 2, which version of Python 2 that is installed on my Mac. But I'm going to be using Python 3, therefore you need to type Python 3 -- version and check if it's installed. If it's installed, then you don't need to do anything else. But if Python is not installed on your Mac, you need to head on over to python.org and then click on here on Mac OS X to check out all of the versions that are available. And you can download the latest version, which is 3.8.5 or 3.7 or even 3.6. It doesn't matter as long as it's 3.6 and above. And as you have seen, I'm using 3.7. The process of installing and downloading Python is the same for all of these versions. So you can select whichever you want. I already have downloaded 3.7.1 and installed it. So I'm going to click on it just to show you that how you can install it on Mac. So all you need to do is that you need to select the file. You have here the installer. As you can see, the installer. You can download the installer. I'm going to click on it, and it's going to take some time to download this package. And once it's installed, all you need to do is that you need to open it, and then you need to just click on a few nexts and accept the license. Just click on continue, and then README. Just make sure that you agree on the license here. Click on continue and then agree, and then just click on install, and it's gonna start installing. Click here on install, and once it's done, all you need to do is that you need to click on close, and you are good to go. And to make sure that Python has been installed, first of all, you can click on here go and then applications, and then you will find Python among your applications. As you can see here, it says Python 3.7, and you can check the if Python is installed or not by also heading on over to the terminal, and you need to close the terminal and then open a new terminal. You need to open a new terminal to check if it's installed or not. And then in a new terminal, you need to type again Python 3 and then -- version, and then hit enter. And as you can see, it's going to tell you that it's going to print out Python 3.7.1. And also make sure that pip is installed. Type pip and then -- version and hit enter, and it should here print out the version and where it's installed. Also pip 3 and then -- version, and then hit enter, and as you can see here, pip 20.2, and it's installed. So this is how you can install Python 3 on your Mac. In this course, I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code in order to run our Python scripts. And in order to run Python scripts in Visual Studio Code, you need to download and install an extension. If you click here on the extensions and then search for Python, you'll find many extensions. And the best extension is this one, the extension that is provided by Microsoft. As you can see, this one. Click on it, and then you need to install it. Just click here on install, and since I have already installed it, here it's going to say uninstall because I have already installed it. And once you install it, what you need to do is that you need to learn how to run your Python scripts with this extension. So suppose that, let me close this and let me show you how you can run a Python script. Suppose that we have a Python script. Let me create here a Python file, and then I'm going to create here a new file. I'm going to click on file and then new file, and then it's going to be just text editor, and then I'm going to save it as, I'm going to save it on my desktop, and I'm going to save it as test.py. This is very important. You need to add the extension py, and I'm going to save it on my desktop, and then I'm going to click on save. And now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to open it, and as you can see, it will automatically be opened. And I'm going to just type a simple Python script here, just print the print, and then here I'm going to say this is Python, and then I'm going to save. I'm going to save, click here file, and then save. And by the way, you can install also PyLint if you wish. You can click on install. It's better to install it. If you wish, click on install and it will be installed for you. And now once you are done, once you just created this very simple Python script, just right click and then click on run Python file in terminal. Click on it and it will execute this file, and as you can see here it says this is Python. So it was executed successfully. And you can also click here on run and then start debugging, or even run without debugging, and it will also execute your code. And if you wish, for some reason, if you wish to remove this extension, you just need to click on the extensions icon and then here search for Python, and then click on it again, this extension which is installed, click on it, and then you can uninstall it or even disable it. And again, you can download the PyLint. You can click here on install and it will start installing. So before we create our project, it's very important to install a few packages and modules. And in order to install all of them, you need to open up your terminal if you are using Mac, and if you are using Windows, you need to open your CMD, the command prompt, and then you can follow along. So what do we need to install? Well, first of all, we need to install Chatbot. So I'm going to say here pip3 and then install and then Chatbot and then hit enter, and this is going to start installing it. And since I have already installed it, it's going to say here requirement already satisfied. The next thing that we need to install is Chatbot corpus. So you need to again type the same command, but you need here to add hyphen and then corpus, and then hit enter, and this is going to start again installing it, but I have already installed it, so it's going to again tell me that requirement already satisfied. But if you didn't install it, then it's going to start installing it. And then we need to install PyYaml. So I'm going to say here pip3 and then install PyYaml and then hit enter. And then we need to install Spacey, but first you need to use Python command, Python 3, to download the EN, the English. So I'm going to copy and paste this command, and then I'm going to hit enter to start installing Spacey. And then this is going to take a few minutes, couple of minutes. and then once it's installed, we need to use pip here, and then pip3, and then install spacey, and then hit enter. And finally, we need to install Jupyter and Flask. So I'm gonna say pip3, and then install, and then Jupyter, and then hit enter. And you can also install the notebook, pip3, and then install notebook. And finally, we need to install Flask. So I'm going to say pip3, and then install Flask, and then hit enter, and it's going to start installing Flask. So these are the packages and modules that we need throughout this course. So you need to install all of them in order to be able to create this project. So now let's start working on our project. First of all, I'm going to create a new folder that's going to hold all of our project files. So on my desktop, I'm going to create a new folder, new, and then I'm going to name it here. I'm going to name it Chatterbot, and then hit enter. And then in order to open it in Visual Studio Code, I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code obviously in this course. And in order to open it in Visual Studio Code, you just need to drag that folder and drop it, and it's gonna open it. And as you can see now, we have this folder opened in Visual Studio Code. So first of all, I'm gonna create a new file. I'm gonna create a new Python file in this folder, here new, and then I'm gonna name it, here I'm gonna name it index.py, and then hit enter, and now we have our first Python file in our project. So let's now start working and learn the basics of the Chatterbot library or module. So here, first of all, I'm going to import it. First, we need to import it, obviously. So I'm going to say from Chatterbot import, and then Chatbot. So the first important and the most important class is the Chatbot. And this Chatbot class will let us obviously create an object, and then we can start building our chatbot in any way we want. Let me now show you the power of using this chatbot class. First of all, we need to create an object, here chatbot, and then this chatbot takes many parameters. The first parameter is the name of that chatbot. You can name it whatever you want. So the first parameter is the name of that chatbot. You can name it just chatbot, or maybe math bot, or maybe a restaurant, or maybe just a simple conversation bot, or maybe for a specific purpose, maybe for your business, whatever you want. But here is just the name of that chatbot. The second most important parameter that you can pass is the read only. So this read only is just a boolean, and it determines whether you want to let this chatbot learn later after as the user is interacting with the chatbot or not. So if you pass here true, then you are kind of disabling this feature. So the chatbot is not going to take the user responses into account in order to respond with a kind of a better or give an accurate, let's say, an accurate response. So this is true here is gonna just kind of disable this feature. If you want to enable this feature, just pass here false. So read only false. So this false, this chatbot is not going to read only. This chatbot is going to take the user responses into account. And then the third most important parameter is called logic underscore adapters, and then equals to an array. And here this logic adapters is just going to give the chatbot the logic that you want the chatbot build its response upon. So if you just want a simple conversation, if you want to let the chatbot respond with just simple strings, it's just the purpose of that chatbot is just a simple conversation, you can pass here, and you should pass chatterbot.logic.bestmatch. And of course, you can, later I'm gonna teach you how you can pass an adapter that will solve mathematical simple equations. So here is just chatterbot.logic.bestmatch in order to kind of respond with just simple strings. And then we need to store this in a variable. I'm gonna just create a variable called bot, and it's gonna be equal to this object. And now that we have this object, and now what we need to do is that we need to kind of train our chatbot. So we need to give it some questions and answers and let that chatbot deal with the situation and answer what the user is going to type and check and get the best possible response that we have. So now it's time to kind of train our chatbot to respond with a specific response according to the data that we are going to give that chatbot and train that chatbot with. So first we need to import here, we need to import from chatterbot dot trainers import, and then I'm going to import what's called the list trainer. And this list trainer is going to take a list and it's going to pick out the best possible response according to what the user is going to type. So let's create an object. Let's create here an object, list trainer, and then I'm going to pass this list trainer takes the chatbot, this chatbot. So I'm going to pass here the bot, and then I'm going to store it in a variable called list trainer, and then it's going to be equal to this object, and then we need to train our chatbot. So I'm going to say here list trainer, and then I'm going to call the train method train, and then we need to pass here a list. So we need to create a list of questions and answers and then pass it to this train method. So we need to create this array or this list here. So I'm going to say here list to train our chatbot, or just list to train, and then it's going to be equal to a list, obviously. But this is very important. You need to pay attention to what I'm going to type here. So this list is going to take obviously just a list of strings, but it's not just a simple list. It's a list where the first element is a question, and the element that just succeeds it is the answer. So each element in this array is going to be either a question or an answer. So if the element is the first element, then it's going to be the question, and then the element that succeeds it is the answer, and then the element that succeeds it is just a question, and each element in this array is just an answer to the element that precedes it. So this is going to be the answer to the one that precedes it, but of course we need to have an even list, because we don't want just to pass a question without an answer, or pass an answer without a question. So this is very important. You can here say hi, and then the answer hi there, and then maybe what's your name? What's your name? I'm a chatbot. And then you can also say How old are you? I am ageless. And of course, you can pass many elements. It doesn't matter. And then once we have this list or array ready, we can pass it to the train. So you can here pass it list to train. Of course, this is a very simple example, but I'm gonna show you how you can fill this with many responses and answers and questions, of course. And now that we have this very simple script, we need to run or execute this script. Here we have a typo. It should be from and then save. Let's now execute our script and see what's going to happen. So if you run your script, of course nothing is going to happen. It's just going to train our chatbot, but we did not create yet a prompt where we will let the user type something in order for the chatbot to respond. So I'm going to just execute this and I'm going to show you what's going to happen. So if you execute this file, guess what? So as you can see, what happened is that the chatbot has been trained. And of course, it has been trained very quickly because we just have a very simple array. It's extremely simple, extremely small. It just contains few elements, 6 elements probably. So it's very simple, and now our chatbot is trained. So now that we have trained our chatbot, it's time to kind of let the user interact with chatbot. And then the chatbot is gonna select or pick out an answer from the answers that we have here in this list. So how can we ask the user to type something? How can we prompt the user to type something? Very simple. We can use the input, and then here in the input, you can tell the user something, type something, or just user. In this example, I'm just gonna say user, and then I'm gonna store whatever the user is gonna type in a variable called user response. And then, now that we have a response from the user, we need to tell the chatbot, hey chatbot, now that we have a response or text from the user, we want you to pick out an appropriate response to this text. So how can we do that? How can we translate that into code? Well, very simple. We use what's called get response. So here I'm gonna say bot and then dot get response, and then we pass the user response or user text. Here user response, and then the chatbot is gonna pick out the best possible answer or response to the user text. But we need also to print out all of this. So I'm gonna print out this response that is gonna be returned by the chatbot. So I'm gonna say here print, and then I'm gonna print out the response. So let me now save, and let's execute our file and see what's gonna happen. So let me here run our Python file and see what's gonna happen. So as you can see now, we have here user, and then the script is waiting for the user to type something. So let's type something. Let's type hi, just hi, and see what's gonna happen. Hi, and then hit enter. And as you can see, what happened is that the chatbot immediately returned hi there. So it worked. Let's run our script one more time and see what's gonna happen. And let's send another text. So instead of sending hi there, let's say I'm a chatbot, or let's say how old are you, because the I am a chatbot is the answer. So I'm going to say how old are you? How old are you? And hit enter. So as you can see, the answer here is ageless. So it worked. But what if we don't type the complete sentence? Let's see what's gonna happen. Let me run our script one more time and see what's gonna happen. So if you run your script, and then if you type, instead of typing the complete sentence, let's say instead of how old are you, if you just say how old, here let me type how old. So the sentence or the question is not complete. Would the user be able to get an appropriate answer or not? Let's see what's going to happen. Let me hit enter and see what's going to happen. So if you hit enter, it also worked. It worked because our chatbot has been trained. The chatbot now is smart enough to pick out the most appropriate response to the text that the user, or in this case, I am the user. So whatever I type, the chat is smart enough to get the appropriate response and send it to me. Instead of letting the user just type one text to the chatbot, we need to let the user type many messages. We need to keep prompting the user to type messages and interact with our chatbot. How can we do that? How can we keep asking the user for more text? Well, we can use here while loop, while, and then while true, meaning that once this script is executed, it will keep asking the user for more text, more and more and more text. So it's just an infinite loop. It's just gonna ask the user for more text, and as the user answers, the response will be sent to that user, and then the user will be asked one more time to type a question or a text, and then once the user types a question or a text, then the chatbot will respond accordingly, and then once the chatbot responds, it's again one more time, it's gonna ask the user for more text, and this process is just gonna keep going on and on and on forever as long as this is true. So in order to create an infinite loop, you can use while true, and then whatever code that is just inside this loop, it's just going to be executed over and over and over and over again forever, just forever. Now let's save and let's run our script, and let me show you what's gonna happen. Now, unlike before, we will have an infinite loop. So let me first run, close this and run a new one. So I give myself some space. So as you can see now, it's gonna here execute our script, and then now here user, and here it's asking me for a text. So let me say hi, and then let me hit enter, and as you can see, an answer has been returned by the chatbot. And then here user, one more time, it's one more time asking me for a text. Let me say something else. Let me say, what's your name? What's your name? And then let me hit enter. As you can see, a response has been returned, and then it's asking me for another text. And this process is just gonna go on and on and on because we have an infinite loop. And you can even make this script look much better by just adding here with this print. You can add here bot or chatbot, and then append the what's going to be returned. So it's going to say user, and then whatever the user is going to type, and then the chatbot, and then whatever response that chatbot is going to give. And then I'm going to also need to kind of add this response in a string in order to convert it to a string, because we are appending it to a string. So we need to pass this response to the str or the string function. Now if you save and run your script, guess what? First, it's going to say here user, it's going to type here user, and it's going to ask me for a response or a text, basically. Let me type hi, and then the chatbot is going to say hi there. If I type what's your name? What's your name? The chatbot is going to respond with hi, I'm a chatbot, and here it says chatbot. So now the conversation is clear that it's just between a user and a chatbot, and it looks amazing. So far, we have just trained our chatbot with simple array that contains only a few questions and answers. But of course, if you want a sophisticated chatbot, you need to kind of fill this array with a conversation that you want to train your chatbot with. Because if this is too small, if this array is too small, then the chatbot is going to be just a very, very simple chatbot, and it's going to be just a useless chatbot. It's better to kind of fill this array with the conversation that you want the user to have with your chatbot. And it depends, there is no rule for this, it depends upon the goal of your chatbot. For example, if your goal is just to answer a few questions, you can add the answer, the question and the answer. If your goal is to provide the user with answers on a specific topic, of course you need to get and be more specific. For example, maybe you want to answer scientific questions, so then you need to add the questions and the answers here. So it depends upon what you want to do with your chatbot. But as I told you, you need to fill this array with something meaningful, something that is going to kind of help you achieve your goal. Aside from that, it's very important to set a default answer, because your chatbot will not always find the answer that the user is asking for. Therefore, it's important to set a kind of a default answer. So if the chatbot doesn't find a good or appropriate response, then the chatbot will immediately return that specific and default, let's say default answer. So how can we set a default answer if the chatbot was not able to get the appropriate response? Then how can we do that? How can we let the chatbot return a default answer or default response? Well, we can do that here by passing an object here. Instead of passing just an array with a string, we can add this logic in an object, and then we need to say that this import underscore path, and then the import path is going to be the best match. But we want a default response. So we want the chatbot to keep answering the questions and keep just interacting with the user according to the data that we have trained our chatbot with. But we also want a default response. So we can here say default underscore response. So what is the default response? Again, the default response depends on what your goal is. So for example, if your goal is to answer maybe scientific questions or give an answer to a specific topic, then here the default response could be, I don't know what you mean, or I don't have an answer yet, or something like that. Let's say, sorry, I don't have an answer. Sorry, I don't have an answer. And it's also important to pass a new key and value that is going to kind of determine when to send this default response, because we don't always want to send this default response. The default response should be our last choice. If the chatbot is just unable to send something, then this is going to be the default, and this is just going to be our last choice. This is just going to be the chatbot's last choice. But what criteria should we set in order to return this default? Well, we can use what's called maximum maximum similarity threshold. So this maximum similarity threshold is just going to determine when to return this default answer or default response. Well, this maximum similarity threshold is just a number that will determine when to return that default response. So it can be from 0 to 1, and let's say the default, by the way, the default is 95, and if you say, for example, 0.9, then it means that, and this number means that the chatbot is just gonna keep searching for a statement to return or a response to return until a statement with a similarity of 0.9 or found, or if the chatbot is exhausted. So it's just gonna do its best. So this number means that the chatbot is just gonna try to get the best possible answer from this array and return it to the user with a similarity, with a maximum similarity. If the similarity is less, then it's just gonna stop searching and it's gonna return the default response. So again, it's just gonna keep searching. It's gonna just keep searching for a response until a statement with a similarity greater than or equal 0.9 is found. Let me now save and run our script and show you what's gonna happen. So if you run your script, and here if you just type type something, let's say hi one more time, it's just gonna return hi there. But if you type something that the chat couldn't recognize, for example, just a silly string that doesn't exist in our data, then if you hit enter, guess what? It's gonna return sorry. So now let me show you how you can create a chatbot that is capable of solving mathematical equations within just a few minutes. So this chatterbot provides what's called the mathematical equation logic, where it's gonna let the user solve any mathematical equation. And we are talking about simple mathematical equations such as addition, multiplication, division, something like that. So let me create a new script here, new, and then I'm gonna name it math.py. And then I'm gonna first import from Chatterbot. I'm gonna import Chatbot, and then I'm gonna create a new object here, Chatbot, and then let me give it a name. Let me just name it math, and then the second parameter that I'm gonna pass obviously is the logic underscore adapters. This is the most important part of this script, because this logic adapter or adapters is going to take an element. It's going to just take an element in this list that is going to let this chatbot solve mathematical equations. So how can we do that? Well, the logic for solving mathematical equations is called chatterbot.logic.mathematical evaluation. That's it. And then we need to store this in a variable, let's say bot, and then equals to chatbot. And then now we need to tell the user to type something, because if we don't tell the user to type something, then obviously this chatbot is going to be useless. So let me, like before, let me use while true to make this an infinite loop, while true, and then I'm going to ask the user to type something. So I'm going to say here input, and then here type the math equation that you want to solve. And then I'm going to store the answer here in a variable called user text, and then we want to tell that chatbot, hey chatbot, take what the question that the user has given us and then respond accordingly. respond with the correct mathematical solution. So here I'm going to say bot and then dot, and then as usual get response, because we want to get a response to what, to the user's text, and then we want to print the answer. So I'm going to say here print, and then here chatbot, and then I'm going to here append this and use the string, and then we are done. But let's add here a print just to make our script look awesome. I'm going to say here math chatbot. Just at the beginning, just once we execute this, this script is just going to print this, and then it's going to start asking the user for questions, and then it's going to respond accordingly. And as you can see, it's a very, very simple script, but it does a lot of things. Let me show you what this very simple and short script is. So as you can see, first it's gonna here type math chatbot, and then it's gonna ask the user to type something, type the math equation that you want to solve. You can say here 4 plus, let's say 9, and then hit enter, and guess what? The chatbot will automatically and quickly give an answer. 4 plus 9 equals 13. And you can even type the numbers here just with letters instead of numbers. So you can here say 4 plus 9, and then hit enter. And as you can see here, the chatbot is going to say 4 plus 9 is equal to 13. And you can here, let's type another thing. Let me type 8 multiplied by 9, and then hit enter. And as you can see, the chatbot is going to answer, and the answer is correct. So this chatbot is very, very smart and is capable of solving mathematical equations, and also the chatbot is answering as if it were a human being. So it just gives a very meaningful answer, and it says it doesn't just give you the answer 72. It says here 8 multiplied by 9, or it even says here in the previous response it said 4 plus 9 is equal to 13. So it's very, very smart, and it's gonna give the user the best possible user experience. So let me now show you how you can create another chatbot that is capable of converting units. So it's capable of converting units such as Celsius to Fahrenheit, or it's also capable of finding out how many hours a day, or how many hours a year, or how many days a year. It's capable of doing all of these, converting all of these units and returning the result to you. So you don't have to worry about converting units. You can create that chatbot that is capable of doing all of that. Let me show you how you can do that. First of all, I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to name it units.py. And then first I'm going to here import from Chatterbot, import chatbot, and then as usual I'm going to create an object here. So I'm going to say here chatbot, and I'm going to name it units, and it's going to be equal to bot. I'm going to store the result, the object, in a variable called bot as usual. And then the most important thing is the logic adapters, and the adapter that we want. The adapter that is capable of converting units is called unit conversion. So first we want chatterbot.logic.unit conversion, and we are done creating this object. The next thing that we need to do is that we want to ask the user to type something. So I'm gonna, as usual, I'm gonna use the while loop, while true, to keep asking the user, and then I'm gonna ask the user to type something, ask a question, and I'm just gonna tell the user that this is a unit conversion chatbot, so that the user knows that he or she must type something related to units. I'm gonna say unit conversion, and then I'm going to store the result in a variable called user text. And now we need to ask the chatbot to answer. So I'm going to say bot dot get response, and I'm going to just pass the user text, and then I'm going to store the result in a variable called chatbot to get the answer. I'm going to say here chatbot response, and I'm going to also need to kind of convert this to a string. So I'm going to pass the response in the string function to convert it to a string before printing it on the screen. So before I print the chatbot response, we need to convert it to a string. So now I can here say chatbot response and pass it to the print to print it on the screen. And by the way, it's important to install pint. If you did not do that, you need to install pint. It's very important to install it. If you did not do so, you need to install pint using pip3 and then install pint and then hit enter if you did not do that. In Mac, you need just to open up your terminal. In Windows, you need to open your CMD and type this command: pip3 install pint. This is very, very important. And now let me run our script and see what's going to happen. So I'm going to here run and then start debugging, and I'm going to run our Python file, this units, and as you can see now, it's going to start asking me. So as you can see here, it says ask a question. So it's waiting for me to type something. Let's ask the chatbot something like how many days in a year, and let me hit enter, and as you can see, it returned. Let's ask the chatbot another question. Let me say how many minutes in a day, and let me hit enter, and as you can see, it returned 1440. Let's say something else. Let me say convert 30 Celsius to Fahrenheit, and let me hit enter, and we have an error here. I don't know why, but let's try one more time. Let me I think I have here some typo, but let me start debugging, and let me run one more time and see what the problem is. I think I had a typo in Fahrenheit, so I'm gonna say 30 Celsius, 30 Celsius to Fahrenheit, and let me hit enter, and as you can see, it converted 30 Celsius to Fahrenheit. You can also ask anything else. You can ask kilometer to convert kilometers to meters. For example, 1 kilometer, 1 kilometer to meter, and it says here 1000, so it's true. So this chatbot is very, very smart, and it's capable of converting pretty much all famous units. So you don't have to, if you were to build this from scratch, you would have to kind of create a very, very long script that has a lot of logic in order to convert all of these units and take care of all of the logic, which is, I would say, a headache. But this simple chatbot is capable of doing all of this. So it's awesome, and you can add it to your website or even web application, or even you can incorporate it into your other Python applications. Sometimes you might need to add some variations to the responses that you are going to send to the user. So here, for example, here we have this list to train, and this list to train has only one answer, and it's always going to be the same answer or the same response that will be sent to the user. And in order to make your chatbot look smarter, then you need to provide different answers. You don't always need to send the same answer or the same response, I should say. For example, if the user sends hi, then you don't always need to send hi there. You can kind of send different answers and different responses. But how can you do that? How can you do that? How can you respond with different responses? Well, you can train your chatbot to respond with a different response by training that chatbot with a different array. So you don't have to train your chatbot with only one array. What you can do is that you can copy the same exact array, and then you can paste it here, and then you can change the responses that you want to send to the user. So instead of saying hi there, you can say hi, or hi mate. And what's your name? You can say, instead of I'm a chatbot, you can say your assistant. And how old are you? You can say here, you can respond with 19, or let's say 30 years old. Why are you so sad? Why are you so mad? You can say something silly. Let me say because of you. Something stupid because of you. Just for the sake of showing you that you can respond with, you can let the chatbot respond with different responses. So, do you have iPhone? I'm gonna say, of course I do. Of course I do. And what's your favorite food? I like pizza. What's your job? I'm here. I'm an assistant or virtual assistant. And then I don't know, here I don't know what you're talking about. So this is another array. Of course, we need to change the variable here. Instead of list to train, I'm going to say list to train 2. And then we need to train our chatbot with this array as well. So I'm going to say list to train. I'm going to say list trainer first, list trainer, and then that train. And then we need to pass the second array. So I'm going to pass list to train 2. So now the chatbot is going to be kind of trained with these two arrays. So each array has different responses, which is awesome, and which is going to give the user a better user experience, because the user will not always get the same exact response each time he asks or sends a question or text. Let me now save, and let's run our script and see what's going to happen. So I'm going to debug our script and see what's going to happen. So here, as you can see, it started executing our code, and then it's going to start asking me here after training. As you can see, after it has trained the chatbot twice, once on the first array, and then another time on the second array. So let me now send a text. Let me say hi, and then hit enter. And as you can see here, it says hi there. Let me send hi one more time, and it's gonna say hi there. Let me send hi. It's gonna say hi there. Hi mate. So as you can see here, the response now is different. So the response is not always going to be hi there when the when the user sends hi, the response could be hi there, and it also could be hi mate. So now the chatbot is kind of smarter. Let's now send another text. Let me send, for example, what's your name? So I'm gonna say what's your name, and then let me hit enter, and here it says I'm a chatbot. Let me send the same exact question, what's your name, one more time, what's your name, and then hit enter. It says I'm a chatbot, and then what's your name, and it should send me, let me send one more time, what's your name, and it should send me now another response. As you can see, it sent me now, it sent me I'm your assistant. So the chatbot is not going to send the same exact response to the text that the user is gonna send to the chatbot. So now our chatbot is kind of smarter, and of course you can train your chatbot with several arrays. You don't have to have only 2 arrays. You can train your chatbot on several arrays. Chatbots are useful when they are specialized to accomplish a specific goal, especially for businesses. So for example, let's say that you have a business and you want to help the user go to a specific page, or help the user with sending some answers to his or her questions. Then your chatbot is going to be very, very helpful, because you don't have to kind of hire a customer assistant. So you can kind of create a chatbot that would help your customers with answers. So how can you do that? Let me now give you an example. So my website is common-code.com, and I have courses in my website. And suppose that I want to help users find out my courses, or find out which courses I teach or I have on my website. Then I can say here in this array, I can say, first of all, I can say hi there. This is important because we want to kind of greet the user when they say hi. And then instead of having this conversation, instead of this, you can help the user with, for example, with possible questions. So if somebody comes over to my website, he or she might say, what courses do you have? So the answer could be not just a simple string. The answer could be a link. So instead of letting users kind of searching for the link to your courses, you can here say, please visit this link for more info, or for all courses. So you can here say https and then common-code.com, common-code.com, and then /, and then /, and then go, and then / unlimited, and this is the link to the courses. And then you can also send another response for another question. So instead of this question, you can say, what is your contact page? This is just an example. The user might not ask this question, so it depends upon which type of business you have, or which type of website you have, or which type of goal you want to achieve. So this is going to be very different from a business or a website. So it depends upon your goal. So I'm going to say here, please visit, or just the link, click on, or head on over to this link, head on over to, and then I'm going to copy the same exact URL, this one, and then I'm going to paste it here. And then you can here pass the link. Let me say contact So let me now save and debug my script and see what's going to happen. So I'm going to click on start debugging, and I'm going to run my file here, and now the chatbot will be trained, and then it's going to just let me type something. So now let me say what courses you have, and now as you can see it's going to send me this response, which is awesome because it's going to help the user, and it's going to also save you some money because you don't have to hire some kind of a person to answer to send answers and responses to users. You can deploy this chatbot to your website, and it's going to take care of these questions and responses. So you can now, the user can click on this and head on over to the link. If you want to build a conversation-based chatbot, it's going to take you a lot of time to create the array that contains all of the answers and responses, and also that contains a conversation between a possible user and the chatbot. So you would have to spend a lot of time to create that conversation, and you probably need to create more than one array in order to make your chatbot smarter, and also in order to train your chatbot on as many responses as possible. But fortunately, here in Python there is a class that's gonna help us get a conversations that have already been created by many other people, and instead of creating your own conversation, you can get all of these conversations and use them instead of wasting a lot of time on building this conversation or conversations. But I would say that sometimes it pays off to create your own conversation, because you might want to kind of respond with specific responses. So if you want to spend the time building your own conversation or conversations, then you can go for it. So there's no problem with that. The only problem I would say is time, because it's going to take you a lot of time. But if you don't have time for this, then you can follow along and use the method that I'm about to give you. So let me show you how you can get conversations that have already been created and use them to train your chatbot instead of creating your own conversation. So first of all, you need here to import what's called the Chatbot corpus trainer. So this is very important, and of course you need to have already installed all of these packages in order for this method to work. So you need to have installed all of these. You need to go through all of them and install them. And now what we need to do is that we need to use this class in order to get the already created dialogues and conversations and train our chatbot on, instead of training our chatbot on this array. So I'm going to remove this array, and then here I'm going to create, I'm also going to remove this list trainer, and also I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to create an object from this class. So I'm going to create here an object, Chatbot corpus trainer, and then it takes this object, takes the chatbot. So it takes this bot. So I'm going to pass here the bot, and then I'm going to store this object in a new variable called trainer. And now what we need to do is that we need to train our chatbot on the data that will be provided by this class. So I'm going to say here trainer.train, and then instead of passing an array of strings that contains the conversation, we need to pass here what's called the chatbot.corpus.english. So this is gonna train our chatbot on conversations in the English language that have already been created by other people on several topics, including money, science, health, psychology. So the chatbot is going to be trained on all of these topics, and it's going to look so smart because it's kind of capable of sending any response to any of the text that the user is gonna send to the chatbot. Let me now save our script, and let's run our script and show you what's gonna happen. So I'm gonna start debugging. I'm gonna start here debugging our script. So as you can see, what's gonna happen is that the chatbot will be trained on several topics. Here we have AI, and then it's gonna start training our chatbot on other topics as well. So here we have computers, and we have also conversations. We have other things as well. Let me show you now. We have here, we have also here food. We have greetings. We have gossip, health, history, humor, many things. And by the way, you need to have installed all of these packages and modules in order for this to work successfully. So now that our chatbot has been trained on a variety of topics, let me interact with our chatbot. So I'm going to say here, what or how are you? Let's just keep it simple. How are you? How are you? And then I'm going to hit enter. And as you can see, the response is just an artificial intelligence. Let me say, what's your favorite food? Favorite food. And let me hit enter. And here it says I don't eat. Let me say, how much money do you have? And it says no need for material possessions. So it worked successfully, and now our chatbot is very smart and is kind of capable of answering pretty much a lot of questions on several topics. And this is awesome if you want to build a conversation-based chatbot. So far, we have been using the terminal in order to interact with our chatbot. But this is not always useful because we want to give the user a better user experience. And using the terminal is not always helpful in terms of the user experience. And you always need to take user experience into account, and you need to consistently improve user experience. So in order to improve user experience, what I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to kind of let the user interact with the chatbot in a web page instead of using the terminal. I'm going to be deploying our website, our chatbot on a web application. So how can we do that? Well, I'm going to be doing that using Flask, which is a web framework based on Python. So I'm going to first here import from Flask. I'm going to import Flask. And of course, you need to have already downloaded Flask. And by the way, if you want to learn Flask and create a complete web application using Flask, which is an awesome web framework, I'd highly recommend checking out my course on Flask, where I teach you how you can create a complete web application using Flask. So now that we have imported Flask, we need here to create an object, Flask, and then here I'm going to say double underscores, and then name, and then double underscores, and then I'm going to store this in a variable called app. And don't worry about that, this is just housekeeping stuff. We need to create an object from Flask in order to run our application in the browser. So here we need to say at the end of the script, we need to say if and then if the name, and then double underscores is equal to main, double underscores, and then main, and then double underscores. Then what we need to do is that we need to use that app.run in order to run our application. And I'm going to also here use the debug parameter in order to display any errors. If we have any errors, we need to display them in order to know what's going on. And of course, you need to set this to false if you go live and publish this application in your website. You need to disable this because you don't want to let customers see problems and error messages. And now that we have Flask object and we have here checked that the name is equal to main, and here we have kind of executed our application, we need to create what's called a route, because in order to deploy our application on a web page, we need to use a route. What's a route? A route is just a URL. For example, we for example have Google www.google.com and then / and then search. This is just a URL, and we need to create a URL like this in order to run our application on that URL, so to speak. So I'm gonna here say @app.route, and then this is gonna take the name of, or the URL itself. So the URL, I'm just gonna deploy our chatbot on our main page. So I'm just gonna say here /, and then we need here to create a function for each route. There must be a function in order to execute that function once the user goes to this URL. So for example, if this URL is 123 dot just a number dot 989 and then /, once the user goes to this local host or URL, we need to execute this function and do something. So here I'm going to create a function and I'm going to name it main, and this function is going to do nothing, but it's going to return a web page. So I'm going to say here return, and then we need to return a web page. And in order to return a web page, we need to import here the render template. We need to import the render template function, and then we need to use it here, render template, and then this is going to return a web page. So I'm going to return a web page called index.html, but we don't have this index.html yet, so we need to create it here. I'm going to create a new folder here, and I'm going to name it templates. And by the way, it must be named templates. This must be named templates. And then inside this folder, I'm going to create a file called index.html. And this index.html will be returned, as you can see here. It will be returned once the user goes to this URL. So this index.html must have an HTML code. So to create the basic skeleton of that HTML, I'm just going to say here, I'm going to type here exclamation mark and then hit enter. And in Visual Studio Code, this is going to create the basic outlook of our website, and then of our HTML page. And then here just for the sake of testing, I'm just going to say here h1, and then I'm going to say this is the home page. And then finally, I'm just gonna here comment out these lines because we don't want to run our chatbot for now, and we also need to comment this out because we don't want to train our chatbot for now. We just want to return to this page. And then once you have done that and saved everything, just run your application. So I'm gonna just start debugging my file, and I'm gonna start debugging my Python file, which is the index.py, and this is gonna run our script on my local server. So I'm gonna be showing you that shortly. And now, as you can see, it has been deployed. Our application has been deployed on our local server, on my local server here, and specifically on this port 5000. So I need to copy this URL, and then I need to head on over to my browser. And obviously, I'm using Google Chrome, so I'm going to open Google Chrome and paste that link. So as you can see, after I have pasted that link, it's going to return this home page, and now our application works in the browser. So now we need to work on the HTML code of the index.html page. So what we need to display, obviously, is that we need to display an input where the user will be able to send a message or a response to the chatbot, and also a button in order to send that response. And also we need to display the chat itself, the conversation itself. So how can we do that? Well, we need here to have, obviously, the HTML code for this. So what I'm going to do is that here, first of all, I'm going to just leave this h1, and I'm going to say here just chatbot, and you can type whatever you want here. And then I'm going to here create a div. I'm going to first create a div, and that div is going to have the is going to hold the conversation itself, the chatbot itself, the chat conversation. So here I'm going to say div, and then I'm going to create another div here. Here, let me create another div, and that div is going to have an ID called chat box. So this is gonna hold the conversation, the chat box, and inside that chat box, I'm just going to display an initial message that the chatbot is just gonna send initially, because we don't want to leave the user uncertain about what's going on. We need to let the user know that this is a chatbot, and he or she must start interacting with it. So I'm gonna say here, I'm gonna add here paragraph tag, and then inside it I'm going to also add span. So this paragraph I'm going to give it a class. I'm going to give it here a class, and that class is going to be named here a bot text, because obviously this is the text that's going to be sent by the chatbot. And let's say something like hi there, because this is a chatbot, and once the user goes to this page, it's just gonna display this message initially. And then of course, as the user sends messages and interacts with the chatbot, we need to inject the messages here and display them in the chat box later. I'm gonna show you how you can do that. But for now, we need to create another div here just below this one, and that div is going to let the user send the messages. So I'm gonna here create another div, and then I'm gonna give it an ID called user input, and then inside that user input, I'm gonna add two inputs, one input for the text itself that the user is gonna send, and another input for the button. So the first input is going to have an ID, again an ID because we want to style all of these elements. So I'm gonna say here text input, and this input is going to have a type of text, because obviously this is a text. And then I'm going to also give it a name. We need the name. The name is very important in order to get the text. So I'm going to give it a name of message, just message, or user message, just to be user message, just to make sense here. And then I'm going to also add a placeholder, because we want to give the user an awesome user experience. So I'm going to say here, type your message, and then the other input is for the button, and I'm going to also give it an ID, and the ID is going to say it's going to be button input, and the type must be submit, because this is a button, and the value where the text is going to be displayed on that button, whatever you want to display on that button, I'm going to display send, just send. And now we have this code, and this is going to be the code of this page, the index.html. Let me now run our project and show you what's going to happen. Of course, it's going to display this HTML code, but of course it doesn't have any styles yet, so it's not going to look awesome. But let me just show you what's going to happen. Let me run my script. I'm going to here start debugging, and I'm going to show you what's going to happen. So let me now head on over back to the browser and refresh and show you this page. Now this page is deployed on the main root, which is just /. So if I refresh, so as you can see now we have this page. We have here h1, and then we have here hi there, sent initially by the bot, and we also have here an input and a button. Of course, we need to add designs to these elements in order to make our application look amazing. So now, as you can see, our page doesn't look good at all. Therefore, we need to add some designs to these elements in order to make our page look amazing and give the user the best possible user experience. So I'm going to head on over back to my project, and then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to here in the index, I'm going to add CSS. I'm going to be using CSS in order to add designs to this page. So what I'm going to do is that here I'm going to add CSS here in the head. In the head here, I'm going to add CSS. Let me just maximize this, and then here I'm going to add CSS by using the style tag in order just to show you, the both the HTML and also the CSS in the same place, and later you can move it to another file. But for now, I'm going to leave it here. So first of all, we need to give our body tag here some design. So the body is going to have a font family of, let's say, monospace, and you can change. And by the way, you don't have to follow all of these. You don't have to apply all of the design that I'm going to give you. It depends upon which design you want to apply to your elements. But I found that this is for me, it's the best design. I like that design, so I'm gonna apply that design. Let me now here add design to the chat box itself. So the chat box obviously is an ID. So I'm gonna say here chat box, and that chat box is going to have margin left of auto, and also margin right of auto. So margin right auto, and I'm gonna make the width only 40% because I don't want to display. I don't want. Let me here add percent. I don't want the width to take the chatbot to take the complete width of the screen. I just want it to be 40%. And then I'm gonna also add a margin top, and that margin top, and the margin top is gonna be 50 px. So this is for the chat box. Now let's work on, here we have the bot text. Let's work on that. So I'm gonna add here dot and then bot text. And since this is a class, of course we need to add here dot. So the bot text, we want to add some designs to it. So I'm gonna say here bot text, and then let's change the font family to another font family. I'm gonna say here let's also use the monospace, and for the font size I'm gonna change the font size to be 16 px, and the text align left. I want to display the text that will be sent by the chatbot on the left of the screen. And I also want to add some line height. Line height is very important. I'm going to add a line height of 25 px, and I'm going to also change the color of that text to blue. I want blue color to that text. And this is for the bot text. Let's work now on the user input. So the user input is an ID. I'm gonna here use the user input, which is an ID. So for the user input, let's add here for the user input, let's add a margin and also a width. Let's change the width and also the margin. So the margin, I'm gonna say that the margin left and margin right auto, because I want to give that user input an awesome design. So I'm gonna also add here margin right, also auto, and I want the width to be also width to have the same width as, remember, as the chat box. We want them to have the same exact design. And then I'm gonna here also add a margin top of 50 px, and this is for the user input. Now let's work on the text input itself. So the text input is an ID. So I'm gonna say here text input, and the text input obviously is the text that the user is gonna type. So I'm gonna add for this text input, I'm gonna add border to this text input, border button, and I'm gonna say 3px, and then solid, and let's add some color, just a random color, and this is a gray color, a degree of the gray color. And the font family also, let's change the font family to the monospace. And the font size, I'm gonna change the font size to be 16, because it's very important to keep the font size the same for all of these inputs, because you want to kind of be consistent throughout your designs, and make all of the in terms of the font, it's very important to keep the font the same for the text that the user is going to type, and also the text that will be sent by the chatbot. So this is for the text input. Let's now work on the button input, and I'm going to add a padding to this button, padding 5px, and I'm going to also change the font family to be also monospace. And finally, I'm going to add a font size. I'm going to change the font size to be 16 also, font size 16, as I told you, because we want to keep things consistent here. So now that we have all of these elements designed, let me save and let me head on over back to the browser. But before I do so, let me also add some designs to this H1, because we didn't add H1 here, we didn't add designs to this. So here let's add a let's center it. So I'm going to say text align, and then I'm going to center this H1, and I think we are done. Let me just save now, and let me head on over back to the browser to show you the result. So let me refresh, and now as you can see, let me zoom out, our chatbot looks much better. Of course, we need to work a little bit further on the design, because there is here, it needs to be kind of pushed to the right a little. So I'm gonna change a little bit here in the design. Here I'm gonna change the user input here to, instead of 40, I'm gonna say here 80%, and I'm gonna center. I'm gonna say here text align center, text align center. And now let me save and let me refresh, and it should look much better. As you can see, now it's centered, and the message that is going to be sent by the chatbot is going to be displayed on the left side, as you can see. So it looks amazing. So now it's time to work on getting the text that the user is going to type here and send it to our application in order to respond here, in order to let the chatbot respond. But how are we going to do that? Well, first of all, let me explain the logic behind this. First of all, once the user types something here and then clicks on send, what we need to do is that obviously we need to get that text, and then we need to send it. We need to send it to our Flask here. So we need to create a route that will get that text, that will respond. We'll get first that text, and then we'll respond by using, remember, by using the get response, and sends the response back to the user and displays the response here so that the user sees that response. But in order to send that text, in order to make a connection between the input and Flask, and Flask application, we need JavaScript. So I'm going to be using jQuery. Of course, you can use vanilla JavaScript, but jQuery is it's better in terms of the code. It's easier in terms of the code. Instead of creating a very long code that's going to send or make a request using vanilla JavaScript, you can simply use jQuery, and the code would be much less. So you can head on over to code.jquery.com, and then I'm going to be using jQuery here. You can click on this, on compressed, and then you can copy this script. I'm going to be using, obviously, I'm going to be using a CDN version of jQuery instead of downloading it. So I'm going to copy this. You need to copy it. Click here to copy that link, and then you need to head on over back to your application, and in the index, you must include this in the beginning here in the top before the styles. I'm gonna just paste it, and now we have jQuery in our application. So now we can start working on the logic and add our code here. So how are we gonna do that? Well, let me show you what I'm gonna be doing. So obviously now that we have jQuery, I'm gonna here at the bottom, what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna create a script and use jQuery. So here, just above the closing body tag, I'm going to create here a script, and that script obviously is going to be using jQuery script. So here inside that script, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a function that's going to first get that text from the user, get that text, and then send it to our Flask application, and then Flask will use this get response to send a response back to us here in the to the user in the index.html. And obviously once the response is sent to the HTML, it will be displayed here, and the user will see everything, will be able to look at the conversation between him or her and the chatbot. So here again, back to the index.html, I'm going to here create a function, and then I'm going to name this function get user response, and then this function is going to be using obviously jQuery. So what I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to get the text from this text input. So I'm going to say here, I'm going to say $sign because I'm using jQuery. And if you don't know jQuery, don't worry, it's just very simple. Just follow along and you will understand, and I'll also walk you through the code. So first of all, I'm going to make a reference here to this ID text input. So it's text input. Let me just get close to this, and then here I'm going to make a reference to this in order to get the text from that text input, and then dot val, which is a function given by jQuery, and this function is going to get the text from that text input. So it's going to pull out the text from this input and store it in a variable. So I'm going to create here a variable called user text. User text is going to be equal to this. So now we have the text from the user. What I'm going to do is that I am going to display that text that's sent by the user here immediately, because immediately after the user types something here and clicks on send, we need to display that text here, but we also need to get it. So we need to do two things. First, we need to get it and send it to Flask, and we also want to display it here because we want to tell the user, hey user, the text that you have typed here has been sent and it's now displayed here. So I'm gonna first here I'm gonna create here a variable called var and then user HTML, and it's gonna be equal to a paragraph p, and then this p is gonna have a class because I want to add designs to the text that the user is gonna send. Once the user sends that text, we want to display it here, and I want to add designs to that element that will be injected here in the page. So here I'm gonna create a class, and that class is gonna be named user text, and I'm gonna also add span as I did I have done with the chatbot text. So here span, and inside that span I want here span, and let me first close this p. Inside that span I'm going to display the text. So I'm going to say here user text. I'm going to display the user text here in between, and now we have this variable, the user HTML. We need to inject that into our page. So we can of course do that using jQuery very easily. I'm going to here first I'm going to remove the text from this input, because once the user clicks on it, we will get it displayed here and remove it from this input. I'm not going to keep it here. I'm not going to keep the text that the user has typed here in this input. So I'm going to say here $, and then here $, and then again reference to this text input, and then I'm going to say that val, and then that value is going to be empty. So the value is going to be empty, is just going to be empty. And then I'm going to inject that user input to our page. So I'm going to make a reference again using the $, and then here chat box. Remember this chat box, chat box, and then I'm going to inject by using the append. I'm going to inject that user HTML. So I'm going to pass this user HTML into the chatbot, which is the container of which works as a container of our conversation. And then now it's very important to also kind of scroll, because as the conversation gets many messages, we will not have enough space here. So we need to scroll automatically as the conversation gets longer and longer. So here I'm going to say document dot get element by ID, and then user input, which is this user input, and then I'm going to say dot scroll into view. So I'm going to say scroll into view, and then I'm going to just here pass an object block, and I'm going to just say start, and then comma, and then behavior, and then smooth, smooth. And this is very important, because we want again to give the user the best possible user experience. So now what we need to do is that we need to make a request and send that text that the user is going to type. So in order to send it, we need to make a get request. So I'm going to here use jQuery to do that. So I'm going to here use $, and then get to make a get request. And then this get is going to take the URL. The URL, I'm going to name it get. And of course, this URL must be created in our Flask application. But for now, we don't have that route yet. But we need to create shortly, we need to create this /get. And this get request is going to take the message that the user is going to type, which is the user text, which is this. So I'm going to say here in an object, we need first to use the name. The name is user message. This is very, very important. It must be here user message. Here it must be user message. And then the message itself, which is the user text. So user message, and then the message, the user text. And then after that, we just call the done, and then we upon done here, we will pass I'm going to pass a callback function to let us know that, to return actually a response. So the response can be here data, can be named data. So this callback function will be sent upon success, and it will send us the data here in this function as a parameter, and then we can use this data in order to display an HTML inside our chat box here. So I'm going to use this data to get the data and display it. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to make a reference to our chat box again, chat box, and then I'm going to say here dot append, and then I need to append the data. But this data we can't just pass it here. It's not gonna look amazing. Therefore, we need to pass it inside a HTML. So I'm gonna create an HTML and pass this data into our HTML. So I'm gonna create here a variable called bot HTML, which is the response from the chatbot. Because again, once the user sends the message to Flask, what's going to happen is that Flask is going to use this get response and send that response, which is the chat response, to the user. And that chat response is this data. It's just this data. So we need to here we need to use p paragraph, and then inside that paragraph I'm going to again use span, and then span, and this, remember, span, this paragraph has a class called bot text. Remember, we have here bot text, so it must be bot text in order for this paragraph to have the same exact design. And then we need here to pass the data here, plus, and then I'm going to pass the data in between. Data. Here, data. And finally, I'm going to pass the data here in the chat box, but text. I'm going to pass not the data, but the bot HTML, because it contains the data as well as the tags. So it's going to look amazing. And we are done with this part. Let me add here semicolon with this part. But something very important we need to do is calling this function. We created this function, but we did not call it. So it's useless until we call it. So when should I call this function? Well, this function should be called upon clicking on the send button, or upon hitting the enter key on the user's keyboard, right? Because once the user clicks on send or hits the enter keyboard, we need to call this get user response and execute this function to get the data from the user, to get the text from the user, and also to take care of all of this, all of these things. So we need here to do that. So I'm going to I'm going to use jQuery here to accomplish that. So I'm going to make a reference to the text input, and then I'm going to say dot key press, and then here function, the callback function, and then the event. And then what we need to do is that we need to first check the key that the user has clicked on. If the user clicks here which, to check which button the user clicked on. If the user clicked on button number 13, which is the enter button, if the user hits the enter button, then we need to call the get user response. And we also want to add to make another reference to the button here, button input, because we also want to execute the same function once the user clicks on the button, once the user clicks on this send. So I'm going to say here button input, and then click, and then function, and then upon upon calling the callback function, I'm just going to use the get user response. I'm going to just call the get user response to send the message and take care of everything. So now we are done with the JavaScript part, which is just going to take the data from the user, and also it's going to display it here, and it's going to make a request. So it's going to make a lot of things. But this is the JavaScript part. So now it's time to work on the route that will let us receive the text that the user is going to type, and also will let us respond and display the response here. So I'm going to head on over to our application, and in the index.py, I need here to create a route at app and then .root, and that route must be named /get, because in the index.html in the JavaScript, I have made a request to this /get. So I need here to have a route that has this /get. This is very, very important. And then I'm going to here create a function, and I'm going to name it get chatbot response. And this get chatbot response is obviously going to first of all, it's going to get the text from the user. Remember, the text from the user, which is this. So you need to get it. In order to get it, all you need to do is that you need to use the request, which is associated with, here associated with Flask. So you need to import it from Flask. Here you need to add a comma and then / and then request. This is very, very important. You need to import the request, and then using this request, I'm gonna call here the arguments, and then .get. Which argument do we want to get? Well, we want to get, remember, the key was, let me head on over back. The key was user message. So you need to pass the user message because it contains the user text. So the user message here in the get, you need to pass it here. And then you need to store this in a variable. Let me here say user text. And then now that we have the user text, we need to let the chatbot respond. And to let the chatbot respond, we already know that we can use the bot.get response. So I'm going to use here bot.get get response, get _ response. And of course it takes this get response, takes the user text as a parameter, user text. And finally we need to return this to the user, because it would be just meaningless to create all of this without returning the response from the chatbot to the user. So we need here to say return, and this must also be passed. Remember, it must be passed inside the string because we want to return a string. So I'm going to say here str, and I'm going to pass the response inside that str. And now the chatbot is going to respond and send that response. But where is this response going to be sent? This response is going to be sent here to the callback function, which is this data, and it's going to be injected or added to these tags, and these tags will be injected into the chatbot, which is the conversation block. So it's going to be injected into our front end, and the user will be able to see that response from the chatbot. So let's now test our application. But before I do so, you need to uncomment these two lines because you want to train your chatbot. You can either train your chatbot using the corpus class, or you can simply use the list trainer if you don't want to use the corpus class. But by the way, this one is going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of time because obviously it's going to train your chatbot on a lot of data. So you need to save. Once you have uncommented these two lines, you need to save, and then you need to run your application. And I have already executed my file because it's gonna take a lot of time, as I told you. As you can see, it's gonna train your chatbot with all of these data, and then it's gonna deploy your application on your local server. As you can see, this is my local server. So let me head on to my browser and show you the result. So let's now test our chatbot. Let me send a message. I'm gonna say, "How are you? How are you?" And then I'm gonna click on send, and it will be sent. And then I'm gonna be waiting for a response. Here it says I'm just an artificial intelligence. And by the way, it takes some time to get this message because we are making a request to our server and we are waiting for a response. So as you can see, now we can interact with our chatbot, and I can send as many messages to this chatbot as I want, and the chatbot is going to respond accordingly. And as the conversation gets longer, for example, if you keep asking and if you keep sending questions and messages, for example here, politics. If you keep asking the chatbot and if the conversation gets longer, what's gonna happen is that the chatbot will automatically scroll to the last message. So let me just keep asking the chatbot some questions. Do you like art? So as you can see, the chatbot will automatically scroll to the last message, and this is awesome because it gives the user that amazing user experience. And something we need to work on is the position of this message on the screen. As you can see, my messages are being displayed on the left side, and the chatbot messages are also being displayed on the left side of the screen. But let's, for example, if you want to display your own messages or the users messages on the right side, you can do that using CSS. So if you head on over back to your project, specifically if you head on over to the index.html, you can do that by adding here to this user input. Let me show you that here. User input, the user text, not the user input, because the user text has the text itself, which is this one. Let me show you this user text, this one user text. So I'm gonna here I'm gonna say user text, and then it's gonna have text align, and then right. We want to display it on the right side. So I'm gonna say here text user text, and then text align right. Let me now save and head on over back to the browser and refresh. And now if you refresh and start sending messages to the chatbot, let me here say hi and then send. As you can see, the message will be displayed on the right side instead of the left side. So now my messages will be displayed on the right side, whereas the messages or responses that I am going to get from the chatbot will be displayed on the left. And by the way, you can also add here chatbot and then colon, and also user and colon. So you can here say, you can always say here in this user HTML, you can here say user, because this is the user, and then for the chatbot you can always here say chatbot here, chatbot. Of course outside this, so it should be here actually chatbot. And now let me save and let me refresh and show you what's gonna happen if you refresh, and then if you send a message, it's gonna say user and then hi. In the response, you should also get chatbot and then chatbot first, and then colon, and then how are you, or how are you doing. So it's working and it's great, and I think the user is gonna have an amazing user experience. So suppose that you have a business that is specialized in weight loss, and you can have a conversation like this. For example, here, how can I lose weight? And here the answer could be, you've got to work out, mate. And then any suggestions, and you can give some suggestions, and then you can also give the user a URL where they can go to. And I have to tell you that chatbots are awesome and very useful when they are specialized in something. When they are very broad, it's kind of difficult to help your customers and your users. But when you are specialized in something, you know and you have some kind of idea of what users could ask you and what users are looking for. Therefore, you can add those questions and those responses that you think that your users and your customers might ask, and instead of just having a very broad conversation with the chatbot, it's not gonna be useful at all. It's just maybe just for fun, or just for creating a project just for fun. But it's important to specialize in something and to deploy your chatbot in a specific business in order to help your business and maybe your website or something like that. So here, let me run our application one more time using this conversation, and I'm assuming that I have a weight loss business. So let me here run my script and show you what's going to happen. So as you can see, my application has been deployed on my local server. Let me now head on over back to the browser and refresh. So now let me send a message. Let me say here hi, and then it's gonna respond. As you can see on the left side, I'm gonna get a response. Here it says how are you? So what else can you do? Well, you can work on the design here. I have here given you this design, but of course you don't have to stick to this design. You can kind of tweak this design, or even apply your own design to this page, to the chatbot application page. For example, here we have this input, this user input, and it only takes here the user input. It only takes 80% of the screen. You can change this if you wish instead of 80%. And also we have the here the chat box also takes 40%. You can change this. Let me show you an example. So you can, for example, increase this chatbot from 40% to 80%. Let me show you that. Here 80%. And also here the text input, you can increase the width here, to be, let's say, 60%. Let me save and let me refresh and show you the difference. So now in the browser, as you can see, the width is different, and the chatbot width takes almost the complete screen width. So it's not, before it took only kind of the middle of the screen, only 33% of the screen, but now it takes a much larger area. And of course you can change the design of this box, of this input. So this input, this text input, you can, for example, here say the padding, you can increase the padding to be 10px. Let me save and show you what's going to happen. Now if you refresh, you'll find that the box now is much bigger. You can even increase it to 20px, and let me refresh and show you what's going to happen. As you can see, it's much larger and looks even better. And you can also change the text here, to be, let's say, color. I'm going to change the color to be here blue, and let me refresh and show you what's going to happen. So the color obviously is now blue. So it looks awesome. And as I told you, there is no rule here. You can play around with the design in order to get your own design. And if you don't want this box, you can do something awesome here. If you don't want that that box, you can here say border. I'm gonna say here border, and then there is no border. I'm gonna say border. Of course, at the beginning here, I'm gonna say border, and then I'm gonna say white, and I'm gonna say 3. It doesn't matter, 3px. Let me say 3px white, and I'm gonna say also solid. To kind of, this is kind of going to remove this box. So now if you refresh, guess what? Now we don't have a box. We only have a line here where you can type, and if the user clicks outside the box, it's gonna be it's just going to disappear. But if you type, it's gonna appear here. So it's kind of a different design that you can apply to your page here. So it's awesome. You can play around with this. There's no rule here, and you can change this solid to be dot or dotted actually. Now if you save and refresh, guess what? You are gonna have here a dotted line instead of a line. So it's awesome. It's just awesome. And of course the color of this that comes from the chatbot can be different, so you don't have to display the color in you don't have to display the text in blue. You can here say let's say yellow, just for the sake of showing you that you can change the color. Now if you refresh, this must be yellow, as you can see. Of course it doesn't look good, but I'm just here showing you that you can change this color. Let's say I think green is gonna look awesome. Green, and let me refresh, and as you can see, it looks awesome. And also for the button here, let me change the button here. Button input, you can increase the padding. Let me say 10px, and I'm gonna add also a border 3px, and then let me say red, solid red. Now if you save and refresh, as you can see, we have here an awesome design. Also the background, if you wish to change the background can be, let's say here, background color, and you can change the background color to any color you wish. I'm gonna say here, let's try the green as well, green, but the red, the border red is gonna look weird. Let me change this to another color, green, but another degree of this green color. Let me say here 3, which is a degree of the black. And of course you can change this to a degree of the green color. So for example, if you click here, you can change this to, for example, this color, or this one. And the color of the text itself can be white. Let me save and refresh, and as you can see now, it looks awesome, much better. Also the edges, you can change the edges here to have some kind of a radius, some kind of a just a circular shape instead of this rectangular shape. So here I'm gonna say border radius, and I'm gonna say 10px, and then let me refresh, and as you can see, it looks much better. And even this chatbot app here, you can change this to another color. I think the green looks amazing, so you can change this H1 to the green color, green, and now it's gonna look awesome. As you can see, our page now is very consistent, and it looks just awesome. So let me now try to send a message. I'm gonna say here hi, and then send, And as you can see, the message will be displayed on the right, and the message that's gonna come from the chatbot is going to be displayed on the left side. So our app now, our chatbot application looks amazing, and the design is awesome. Can you use another language instead of English? The answer is absolutely. So you can, instead of using this array, instead of typing here in English, of course you can type with any language you want instead of English. But the good news is that there's also another option. Instead of typing in another language, you can even use the corpus class with another language. So instead of English, you can here say Spanish. And then if you save and if you run your application, guess what? You will be able to use Spanish in your chatbot. You will be able to communicate with your chatbot in Spanish instead of English. Let me show you that. So let me here type something in Spanish. Even though I don't know a lot of Spanish, I just know a few expressions. Let me here type hola, for example, hola, and then send. It's gonna respond here with a Spanish word, as you can see, hola. Let me here type ¿Cómo estás?, which means I think how are you. Let me send, and it should respond with Spanish, as you can see, estoy bien. So it works, and now I will be able to communicate with my chatbot in Spanish. And even, of course, your customers will be able to communicate in Spanish. And this is by the way, only this is for the corpus class, but I'd recommend using your own arrays, because in other languages it doesn't provide a lot of conversations, and therefore it's not going to be an advanced web application. Therefore, I'd highly recommend using your own arrays if you want to let customers interact with your chatbot in another language. So now I'm going to show you how you can create a chatbot that is specialized in returning the weather forecast to users. So what I'm going to do is that, first of all, I'm going to be using here an API that returns weather conditions, weather forecast, and this service is called openweather.org, and you can register here for free. It's for free for the basic plan, and you don't have to get business plan unless you intend to create a commercial application. But you can use the free plan, which is gonna let you make 1 million calls per month. And all you need to do is that you need to register, and once you register, you need to confirm your the email that will be sent to your inbox, and then click here on my API keys, and then you will be able to copy your API key and use it in order to make calls and get weather forecast. And of course, you can click here on generate to generate a new key. And by the way, the key will be activated within 10 minutes of registration. So you need to wait almost 10 minutes or more in order for this key to be activated and in order to be able to use this key. So how can you make calls? Well, first of all, you need to click here on Get Started, and then you need to click on Current Weather for any geolocation, and then here it's gonna tell you how you can. It's gonna walk you through on how to get weather condition in a specific city. And by the way, it's super simple. All you need to do is that you need to copy this. You need to copy this URL and then head on over to your browser and create or open up a new tab, and then you need to paste that URL. And then what you need to change is that you need here to pass your API key, which is the key here. Let me show you that here, which is your API key. You need to copy it from here and then paste it here, and then here the the query is equal to, and then something. You need here to pass the name of the city. So here I'm passing here San Diego. You can of course pass whatever city you want. For example, here let me say New York, and then hit enter, and as you can see it's going to return weather forecast in New York City. So this is how it works, and this is how you can create an account and get your API key, and this is how you can make calls. So this is the first step, which is creating an account and getting your API key. And now the next step that you need to do is that you need to use this URL in your application. But how are you going to do that? Let me show you how you can do that. Well, first of all, in your index.py, we need to import a module called requests. Not this request, but another separate independent module called requests. So I'm going to say here import and then requests, plural, not singular. So this is another module other than the requests class that comes with Flask. Again, this is requests. And once you have this requests, you can make a call here in your application. Remember, we have this get, which is the function that will be called once the user clicks on send here. Once the user clicks on send, this function will be called. So we need to make a request using this requests module, and then dot get in order to make a get request. And then inside that get, we need to pass the URL. The URL, which is this URL, let me copy it, and then let me paste it here. And now we will be able to make a call, and then we can store the result in a variable called raw data, because this is going to return, this call is going to return, it's going to return this JSON. Let me show you that. It's going to return this JSON object. And by the way, this JSON object contains the coordinates of the location you are searching for, its weather condition. And then we have the weather, which contains the description, the main, and the description here, it says overcast clouds. And also we have the temperature, and here feels like, also the temperature. And then we have the temperature, the minimum and the maximum, and the pressure, the humidity. So this service gives you a lot of information about that location, about the weather conditions in that location. And let me go back to our project. And then here, once we get this JSON object, now here, we need to convert it. We need to convert that raw data into JSON. So I'm going to say here raw data.json. So this is going to be this is going to convert it to JSON. So I'm going to say here, I'm going to say result, and then it's going to be equal to raw data.json. And finally, we need to pass this result, which is a JSON object, we need to return it to the caller. So I'm going to say here return and then result. Return result. And this result will be given to the caller. And who is the caller? The caller obviously is JavaScript, which is this get, and then user message, and then done, and then data. So this data is basically this result. So this result is gonna kind of hand this JSON object over. It's gonna hand this JSON object over to JavaScript, specifically to this variable called data, and then it's gonna display it here. Let me show you now what's gonna happen if we type anything here. If we type anything, let me first refresh. And let me here type anything, it doesn't matter. And then if you click on send, what's gonna happen is that it's gonna return object. As you can see, it returned the object, which is the JSON object, which is this. But of course, we don't want to display here object. Instead, we want to display, for example, the temperature and also the description and maybe the humidity or the pressure. And it's up to you. I'm going to leave it up to you which keys, which information you want to display to or give the user. So what I'm going to do is that here in the index.html we have the data, and we can here say data dot and then access whichever key we need to display. So for example, if you want to display the description, you can simply say weather. First you need the weather, and then since this is an array, I'm going to say weather and then the first element, which is an object, and then inside that first element we want to access the description. So you can here say data and then dot weather, and then since this is an array, I'm going to say here, I'm going to say weather 0 because we want to access the first element and the only element, and then dot and then description because I want to get the description. Now if you save and if you refresh and make another call here, let me click on send, it's gonna here say overcast clouds, and in the API it says here overcast clouds, so it worked. And maybe you want to get the temperature as well and display the temperature. You can even here say, you can even say here plus and then data dot, and then we want to access obviously the temperature. So the temperature lies in a key called, inside the key called main. So first we need to say here main and then temperature, temp. So main and then temp. So in our application, I'm going to say here main and then dot temp. First we need to access the main dot temp, and I'm going to also add here plus and then some space, just space. I'm going to say here, let me here say temperature, so that the user knows that this is the temperature. So I'm going to say here temp and then space and then here a hyphen and then the description. Now if you save and if you refresh, guess what? And if you send something and click on send, guess what? You're going to get the temperature as well as the description. So here it says 292.78 and then overcast clouds. So it worked, and now you can get any key you want, any piece of information, and display it and give it, basically hand it over to the user. So now we have two problems in our weather chatbot application, which is the first problem is that the user here types anything he wants, and then the temperature and the description or the weather forecast will be returned to him or her. And we don't want that. We want to let the user specify the city that he wants to get its weather forecast. And also here we are returning weather forecast of New York City, and we don't want that. We want to return the weather forecast of any city, of basically of the city that the user lives in or interested in knowing its weather forecast. So how can we do that? How can we kind of be clear with the user and let the user know that this is a chatbot weather application, and kind of prompt the user to type and give us the city that he wants to know its weather conditions. So to do that, first of all, we need in our in our index.html, we need to send an initial message instead of here hi there. You can first say hi there, and then you can display another message that says which city do you want to know its weather conditions or forecast, and then the user should type a city. So now we are clear, and also here you can type weather chatbot application, And on top of that, we want to get the city from the user. So the user here is going to type user text. The user here should type actually a city. So this user text should be the city. So we need to get it. We need to get that city and then pass it. We already have, by the way, we already have it here because this user text is basically the text that the user has typed here. So the user is going to type here a city. And once the user provides the city to us, we want instead of passing New York City each time we make a request, we need to pass the city that the user is going to provide us. So I'm going to say here user text, which is basically the city that the user is going to provide us. So now we will be able to make a request and get a weather condition of a specific city, a city that the user wants to know its weather forecast. And finally, we just return the result to the user. Now, if you save and if you head on over back to your browser and refresh, you'll find that it's different. As you can see here, we have weather chatbot application, and then here it says hi there, and then which city rather do you want to know its weather condition or weather forecast. So I'm going to type here, for example, San Diego, and then I'm going to hit enter or click on send, and guess what? Now it's going to return the temperature and the description of the weather in San Diego. So it worked. And now let me type something else. Instead of San Diego, let's type, I don't know, let's say Los Angeles. And then let me hit enter. And now it's going to return the temperature and the weather condition or description of the weather in Los Angeles. So it worked. And by the way, again, you can display more information and you can customize the message that you want to return to the user. So you don't have to return just this. You can customize this. You can customize this in the index.html. Instead of using this p and span, you can use other elements. And here, instead of typing temp, you can type temperature. So here you can type temperature instead. And you can here say conditions. And of course, you can get conditions. You can get more information such as the humidity if you wish to display the humidity, the pressure. So the humidity, for example, if you want to display the humidity, you would first access the main and then the humidity. So I'm gonna first here I'm gonna say plus, and then here another plus, and then I'm gonna say humidity. And then in order to access the humidity, basically we need to say here data and then dot main and then dot humidity. And now if you save, and of course here we need to add plus. Now if you save and refresh, guess what? You should get the humidity as well. So for example, I'm going to say again San Diego and then send, and it's going to return the temperature, the conditions, and also the humidity. And by the way, we need to add here some space, humidity. Let me refresh one more time and say San Diego, and let me send. And as you can see now, it says temperature, conditions, and then humidity. So it worked and it looks awesome. And here let me just make sure that I'm getting the correct weather forecasts. I'm going to say here San Diego, and the humidity should be 77. So here it's 77, so it's correct. And finally, once you have changed all of these things, you need to run your Python file, because sometimes it might not work here, and it might just keep loading your page and it might not work. So sometimes you would have to change to to run your Python file. And also don't forget to comment these two lines out, because we don't want to train our chatbot. If you keep training your chatbot, it's going to take a lot of time. I'm just here commenting these out, these lines out, because I don't want to use them for now. But other than this, it worked, and now as you can see, our application is a weather chatbot application that is specialized in something, which is awesome.